When an AI agent diagnoses a production incident, only 30% of what it reads is logs and metrics. The other 70% is the poking around a senior engineer would have done by hand. Thanks for listening to Operationally Intelligent, the podcast for people turning data into business value. In this episode, I speak with Kyle Forster, founder and CEO of RunWhen, about the layer of context that sits alongside the three pillars of observability and why agents need it to work safely in production. Kyle calls it the exhaust. The CLI calls API queries and dead ends that accumulate while an agent explores the system between incidents. Your metrics, logs, and traces tell you what happened. The exhaust is what lets an agent interpret them the way a senior SRE would. We get into why typical stacks wreck LLM accuracy, what safe for production actually has to mean when an agent has write access, and what AI could mean for the future of SRE. Kyle, thanks for joining us on Operationally Intelligent. It's great to have you here. I wonder if we could just start by talking a little bit about what brought you to where you are today, running RunWhen. Maybe talk a little bit about your career. I know you sort of started at Cisco. What happened in between?
Sure. So way back when dinosaurs roamed the earth, I worked at Cisco. I consider that my alma mater. And really one of my big learnings from there was how do you design ultra high reliability systems, and how do you design engineering cultures that are incredibly focused along reliability. I would say that was a mantra over and over of why do Cisco products win in categories over and over and over and over. And it was just because they never go down. And the culture around that at that point in time that I think was very, very important, that I loved. After Cisco, I was the founder of a company called Big Switch Networks. We were one of the first companies in software-defined networking. We commercialized a whole series of technologies, a fantastic team. I mean, there's so many days. I'm in good touch with a large number of people from that team. We really had a beautiful thing going. We were at the very forefront of a huge category change in networking. And our specialty was ultra high reliability data centers, the kinds where when things go down, I remember the chief architect for one of our customers saying, "Kyle, if our network goes down, there goes capitalism."
Nice. Yeah. Just keeping it grounded. Yeah.
You may be right.
Yeah.
So that was a wonderful thing. We got acquired by Arista. After that, for my sins, I wanted to see the world outside of networking. I joined the Google Kubernetes team as I had part of the product management organization, and loved it. Really, really loved it. I joke around. I kind of sheltered in place during COVID at Google, and just met some fantastic people. Just the diaspora from the team at that time is just it's a wonderful, wonderful group. But what really caught my eye was the SRE culture at Google, because I saw many of the same themes that I'd seen a couple times in my career of how do you create engineering cultures around ultra high reliability, and then what do those cultures tend to produce? And there were real patterns outside of networking, and that got me very excited. It sort of formed some of the really early ideas around RunWhen. Could we take this engineering culture and turn it into repeatable processes and products that support people that want to move their organizations towards this culture? Obviously, AI played a very, very large role in the way we're thinking about it. Even traditional machine learning played a very large role in the way we're thinking about it before AI. And then with the advent of AI, we rethought the entire control plane effectively from the ground up. But taking this, instead of this sort of vibe coding, slot cannon approach, can you use LLMs in ultra high reliability environments to do ultra high reliability work? And that for me is a fascinating topic. And I think it continues to be very important in the industry. I think that we're on the very forefront of solutions to this problem that I think I think it's a problem we're solving.
Nice. So what does RunWhen actually do?
We have we have a platform that people use to build agents, and we build them jointly with our customers. Sometimes our customers are building them by themselves. But I think the hallmark of our agents is that they are running automation, and in some cases building automation that is safe for production. And safe for production means a lot of different things. I could spend the entire podcast on that. But if you think about what an agent needs to do, that's really truly going to help an SRE team. That's really going to help a DevOps team that's deploying code in production. It's really going to help a cloud infrastructure team. That's really going to help even a FinOps team. That's actually going to go all the way through and make changes. That's really going to create safety lanes for developers to get real views into production. There's actually a lot of different stakeholders here, and there are a lot of different agents with very different concerns for all these different stakeholders. But there's one very consistent layer across all of them at the agent skills level. And that's, how do you absolutely unquestionably guarantee that they're going to be safe when accessing mission critical systems?
Yeah, I think trust is still a big issue with people when it comes to sort of AI just autonomously running around in the background, especially in production environments. So is that what you can instill into your customers when they use RunWhen?
I would say after the Pocket OS incident that you may be familiar with, where somebody's coding agent effectively did an escalation of privilege. The coding agent had read-only credentials. It found other credentials on the engineer's laptop, escalated its own privileges, and used those to fix a corrupt database that happened to involve deleting the production database and all of its backups. And you can say, oh, they should have done these privileged credentials. The team did. The team did. They had done everything right except for one single person in the organization had a credential from a project 18 months before. So anyways, right after that happened, we actually got calls from 4 different financial services firms, 2 of whom had had this happen, and they weren't public about it, saying, hey, we heard that you were the kind of the safe for production agents folks. Can you come take a little bit of a look at what we're doing? Can we do an assessment? Can we either talk about joint designs? Can we partner with you on a services front, or can we partner with you on a product front?
Yeah, well, yeah, it sounds like you're definitely you sort of scratched a niche for yourself and really sort of found yourself in a very valuable sort of space at the moment. Yeah, it's a very tricky area. I think everybody's very keen to put AI to work, but there's always that huge safety concern when it comes to exactly cases like that seem to happen all the time as well. People go too far without those guardrails. And you wrote an interesting blog piece that you published last December. Do humans still read logs? I was hoping when I started that to find that humans never need to read logs again, because I think all humans never want to read logs again. And in that, you explained that you found your platform used metrics and logs, maybe only 30% of its LLM calls. And in a conversation with Charity Majors, they asked if what is the other 70%? Like, what did you find when you actually dug into that other 70%?
It was fascinating. I mean, it was really fascinating. It's a data set from fourth quarter last year. We haven't redone the full analysis, but I've got to say, looking at the results, even from our last couple of months, just eyeballing them, I mean, I'm much more certain even now of the results. They're so clear. I mean, it's just so obvious when we look at our own system logs and at users, the exhaust coming from users really using our product. Logs and metrics represent about 30% of the data that's going to LLMs. 70% looks more like CLI tools calls, API calls, SQL queries, all of which the agents, we have this concept of build time, all of which the agents asked for permission at build time. Hey, is this SQL call okay at build time? They don't randomly come up with SQL runtime. Is this API call okay for me to do at build time, not at runtime, et cetera, et cetera. So they come up with this whole series of different skills at build time, make sure that it's okay for them to run them. But at runtime, the fascinating thing is about 70% of the data going to an LLM during an incident is actually historic data that the agents got while poking around in between incidents. And it maps so precisely. And credit to Charity, she was the one that pointed it out. I didn't really think about it this way, but she's like, that really sounds like a senior SRE poking around in a large scale system between an incident. And how does an SRE get really good at their job? They're probably on the CLI. They're probably calling API calls. They're exploring and discovering way beyond the dashboard in between incidents. And that's what makes them great during an incident. And our data showed the exact same thing. The exact same behaviors coming out so precisely. And, it was beautiful to watch. So I think we're kind of in the business of ultra high accuracy, for obvious reasons, right? Like, production safety, we're not only doing read only, there are cases where we're doing read write operations. We've been doing read write operations in Fortune 100 production systems for 2 years now. And so accuracy is not optional. And so
Yeah.
when you really care about ultra, ultra, ultra high accuracy, you can't build AI on top of metrics and logs alone. It's the wrong data set.
Yeah, I think you described it as being like the notes a senior SRE jots down. It's all that extra context. It's the I guess the human signals almost, right? It's the things that the metrics don't tell you. It's just that sort of extra context that a human would accumulate over time just by doing the J job. I think one of the most striking points is the sort of the synonym homonym mess. Is store the same as location, is collection a vector DB or a Java error. Experts don't even notice it, but I think it drives LLMs bananas. Why does that sort of linguistic chaos matter so much for operational intelligence?
That's a great question. Yeah, so we in the data set we sort of identified, give or take, like 30 of these sort of problem areas that show up in logs and that too. But a lot of them, describing them takes a lot of pages, and everybody gets bored. So I think in the article I put together just the top few that are easy to hand. And the synonym homonym problem to me is one that's just so everybody's felt it at some point. Coming from the Kubernetes team, let me use a Kubernetes example. Hey, I had the sheer number of times I have said, something looks a little funny, and then realized I'm actually using the wrong context set in my kubectl. It happens a lot. I mean, yeah, especially when I'm in a rush in between meetings. So this happens to humans as well. Like, hey, I set the wrong context, and suddenly I'm looking at our staging cluster, and I thought that I was looking at our test cluster, and something feels a little bit funny, but I might not notice it until later. But the names are the same. I mean, if I look at our application in staging, it shows the same names as our application in the test environment. And it's only kind of the sort of knowledge of we could call it a graph. It's easier to just think about it as a directory structure. Hey, where am I in the directory structure? My own sense of state that lets me interpret these names appropriately. Carrying those through, it confuses the heck out of humans, because humans, as we think in language, as we think in shorthand, oops, we forgot to always carry the cluster name that I'm active in all the way through. And it confuses the heck out of LLMs. So we have, one microservice that we always bring up in examples because it's particularly problematic on our end, Pappy. And am I looking at Pappy in staging, or am I looking at Pappy in test? Hey, I have a readout of what just happened to Pappy over the last 2 hours. I have a readout of why it happened. Which Pappy was it?
Yeah.
There are lots of tricks that we do to carry through the context as much as we can, and they all make the user interface painful, like obnoxiously, horrifically painful. And still sometimes we have to do it, but the amount of tips and tricks, there's no like single algorithm here. It's like a game of whack-a-mole. But I just come back to when you see the same name repeated in a bunch of different contexts, it crushes LLMs. It crushes LLM algorithms. And it crushes humans typing in, hey, can you check out what happened with Pappy? Which Pappy do you mean? Do you mean the one that you talked about 1 minute ago, or you mean the one that you talked about 5 minutes ago? Because they were pretty different. So I think it's a human interface problem as much as an LLM problem. And if you look at metrics labeling, where you don't have a whole lot of text surrounding the metrics label, this is where the problem gets particularly pernicious. And you see LLMs making just enormous, enormous mistakes. They're very tricky to find because the LLM generates like a paragraph-long metrics query. And it takes a huge amount of human work to try to figure out, did it carry through all of the context, or did it just sum up metrics from staging and test and prod all in one sum? It's incredibly difficult for humans to debug. It's a problem that humans make mistakes at.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
yeah, I mean, I just the amount of time I found myself typing into my CLI, use AWS profile dev, even just as simple as that. Like I get it wrong and I forget it, and I'm reading logs for an EU customer when it should be for a US customer, and so it is a definite challenge in all contexts for people and LLMs alike, and I think it's kind of the nature of staged systems, right? They are supposed to be the same as you move across environments, because that's the point of having environment. So that signposting, that sort of SRE notebook that captures all that extra context. And I think, at Squared Up, we're trying to kind of solve that with our own, our own Claude plugin with its own agents built in, and that kind of stuff. But just getting that right is so difficult. I was just so pleased with myself for writing my own little AWS investigator agent, and a week later it doesn't work properly again.
The phenomenon problem is, I think the number one as we think about AI for production. It's just it's something humans can grasp because humans make the same mistakes, and I think it's not something that you can fully solve in code because there's a human interface problem, and it's a awful problem with metrics. Like with metrics, it's like a really, really, really particularly bad problem. That's why I think so many like the early metrics based AI SRE implementations were just so shitty. 18 months ago or so, the first few they're just wrong really often in any system that didn't have perfect metrics labeling.
Yeah. For teams who've spent, let's say, a decade on those 3 pillars of observability, what is the sort of the mental shift that you'd ask them to make? Is it a new pillar or a different thing entirely? How do they move forward from just those 3 pillars to in an AI world?
So there's the human changes, and then there's the pillars changes. And I say this slightly because I'm kind of more of a tourist in observability than a true native. I didn't live through the 3. I was a networking guy. I didn't live through the 3 pillars arguments and should it be 2 or should it be 4. But my view as a bit of as an observer into the observability industry is that I do think that there will absolutely be the emergence of the account tracing, or the 4th pillar, 5th pillar, whatever it is. There will be the exhaust of agents crawling through the system and running CLI and API and data queries. And it would be long traces of, hey, here's what an agent did while crawling around the system. Might even be traces of here's what a human did crawling around the system. That will be deeply semi-structured, tagged data sets that will be the really critical context through which that we mine when we feed any of the existing 3 pillars data into LLMs. I think it's the massive cleanup for systems that don't have perfect metric ontologies. I think it's the massive cleanup for systems that have observability holes that sometimes they know about and sometimes they don't. So I do think that data set, I think it will over time be recognized in the industry as a deserves its own pillar. And then it's a fascinating data set of the trace of here are all the things that an agent found while bopping around the system in between incidents.
Yeah, I can definitely sort of echo. I mean, even just in sort of, like say a vibe coding session, like watching the mistakes that get made, I find more useful to learn from, to improve what's going to happen next, or even just to find issues in our own code base, right? Like the agent, this super intelligent coding expert just made this huge error in an assumption it made. And so I think, describing that as like the exhaust, I think it is very valuable. I find that often more telling when I'm trying to troubleshoot something. If an agent can't even work out why something broke and goes down the wrong path, and knowing what it was doing, seeing its output, I rely on that way more than spending my time in CloudWatch and that sort of stuff.
There's this fascinating debate in code agents, and you see some boards where charities were kind of references it a bit, but is a smarter, does a coding agent catch errors more successfully when it gets everything right the first time, which is kind of like a massive model argument working on problems that are very derivative, where it's got a lot of examples? Or do you actually wind up building far more accuracy with a slightly smaller training set, even a slightly smaller model that you let run and let it bump and make a bunch of errors and verification loops, and oops, I messed this up, but I saw it, in my verification loop. Oops, I messed this up and I saw it in my verification loop. And that exhaust trace actually leads to I think the argument, and it's hard to benchmark this stuff, but the argument is that actually an exhaust trace of bouncing around and exploring the edges by having a lot of things not work along the way actually results in repeatedly higher accuracy at the end than something that got it right the first time and never explored any of the edges of things that went wrong. And while the entire conversation is in coding agents because of massive mega market, I think the exact same thing applies to production systems. For read-only data, hey, reading only like some stuff around the edges and seeing that it's irrelevant is actually massively important data to carry forward. And that exhaust is is real peripheral intelligence that I think is going to be well, I can tell you for certain in our system, I mean, that's why we get high 90s accuracy. It's
Mhm.
it's not secret sauce. It's why we get high accuracy. And I don't think any system can be built to get into the high 90s accuracy wise that doesn't treat that as critically important. And we see it amongst some of our top competitors too. Like they're really advanced competitors have clearly kind of built some of this memory in, and they're using this way beyond metrics and logs data.
Yeah. Lots of companies, I guess, probably don't really know how to actually fold agentic AI sort of into their existing observability or monitoring practices. Where would you tell them to start, and what do you think is the most common? What's the most common thing you see people getting wrong when they try to make a leap into like AI powered SRE, for example?
You know, my answer 6 months ago and 12 months ago is very different from my answer today. Um, and I think my answer today is less popular because it kind of bleeds into career advice, and it's not, you know, it's not my career, so take it or leave it. Um, but I think that called the L1 operations support read my observability data and escalate or come up to a conclusion. I think that entire job is going to tokens. I think the job is gone. Every employer that I talk to is trying to use features from an existing observability vendor or features from us to do that L1 job. The faster they can move that from humans to tokens, the better. So I
Mhm.
think that role is going away. And for people whose entire ambition is to just fill that role, I would be really, 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 really scared. Now there's the L2 role of saying, okay, we've got observability data, and we're trying to marry that with a lot of tribal knowledge that we have in our head, with a lot of documents, with our own exploration of kind of CLI background. A lot of the work that a senior SRE would do poking around the system. I think that role has a much longer tenure because now suddenly we have much messier data sets to do the reasoning over. And it's not so like, hey, just read my dashboards back to me. So I think that role has longer tenure. But if that role, every employer that I talk to, frankly, wants to turn as much of that role into tokens as possible too. Now there's an L3 role which is a little different, right? And I'm using specific categories. Yeah, you can disagree with them as you see fit. But there's like this L3 role where you start to go from production operations into what I think of as SRE, where you're making a lot of judgment calls. You're saying, okay, here's what I saw, but here's what we should do about it. Do we do an emergency infrastructure change? Do we spend the time it takes to get all of the context to the development team to try to do an emergency software patch? Do we do an emergency infrastructure change to buy us some time and then buy the team some time to do a software patch and do all the proper research required? There's a lot of human judgment that goes on there that I don't think will ever, 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 ever be tokenized. Period. Full stop. So I think that those roles are going to be massively valuable. I think those roles will be more higher paid. And the big unlock, I think, for those roles where they go from like massive pay jumps, and this was a blog post I did at the beginning of the year where I think qualified SREs are going to wind up seeing a 30% pay rise, is that folks in that role who really figure out how to use automation, how to build, so I should say, how to use code generation or really build automations. I think those are the people that are going to get paid a lot more than they get paid today, because code generation, it works incredibly well, like
Mhm.
incredibly, incredibly well. And if you're using AI to read your dashboards, that job is going away. If you're using AI to write code that automates work, even if you've never written code before, not only is that job not going away, that job is going to become vastly higher paid. We're seeing, we had a someone like senior SRE title using our system a week ago, and she had not written a line of code in about 20 years, certainly not in the day job. And she used our system to automate a whole series of areas. It was like about 45 minutes. And she's like, these are questions. I support 300 developers. These are questions that I get this thundering herd of developers asking every single day. And you said that I just automated it. So every time they ask the question, they get an answer.
Mhm.
This was incredible. And I think that's kind of I just think that that's the future here. And I think those roles are incredibly important, incredibly high paid. So while some roles are going to tokens, I think that role is boosting.
Yeah, I pretty closely agree with that sort of analogy. Like certainly at the sort of the different levels. I mean, I've seen cases where I mean AI can let anybody with an idea sort of run with it, right? Like that's the point. Whether they run with it well, I think is the differentiator. Like someone who's never written a line of code before and has an idea for building an app or building some automation, they may get to the end state, but everything that sort of backs that maybe isn't what you'd consider safe for production, right? Security gaps or, all sorts of things that you need experience to think about when you're building a system. So yeah, I completely agree that the lower level roles yeah, will eventually disappear to tokens, but that leaves I think the human knowledge, yeah, the value attached to human knowledge, where AI is an enhancement to that rather than a replacement. That's the interesting sweet spot.
I mean, one thing I'm really excited about, and I would say even a year ago, we were too nervous to really go after this in a serious way and put R&D investment behind it. 6 months ago, even we were still pretty nervous, and I think to me it's becoming more and more obvious, and we'll put more and more R&D dollars behind it. I mean, I showed an early prototype to a friend. He's like, "Oh, you're building Claude Code for SREs." I'm like, "Huh?" He's like, "Yeah, because like I'm an SRE, I use Claude Code all the time. It doesn't work all that well for me. The structure of my code is different from application code. The research work that I do while writing the code is a little different from the research that a developer does on their laptop. Like I'm doing research in production and using that to write automation that will do more research. You can do, read write in production. I can't always test that. Some of this I can test on my laptop. Some of this is very dangerous to test, like really dangerous to test, and I know it, and there's no other option. So it's like Claude scares the heck out of me. This is not really built for my job.
Hmm.
Claude Code, like the whole harness is it's not really built for the particular work that has to be done there. So I think if we can embed both large amounts of agent skills that we have, plus I think we're working on a bunch of other things um, that really make an awesome, awesome tool for the automation for people who, and tuned for a lot of people in the role who either haven't written code professionally in a long time or never wrote code professionally, but they probably wrote it personally, right? Our target market is people who've actually done a little bit, at least done a little bit of nights and weekends work building stuff. I think that there's just a really interesting and fascinating market opportunity there.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. I mean, I think what makes automated diagnostic and remediation safe enough to run live is I think that's the question that gets solved, right? It's like I wouldn't trust Claude Code. I mean, I'm logged into this AWS CLI locally. Nothing would stop Claude Code with bypass permissions from doing anything I can do anywhere.
Uh,
And it is those guardrails. Like I wouldn't consider Claude Code to be safe for production. I consider in an operational sense, right? Obviously, it's writing code that eventually ends up there with lots of humans in the loop still. But yeah, it's just getting over that sort of trust barrier. Like I don't feel that without something extra in Claude Code to give it the specialist skill in any area, right? Even if it's marketing copy or whatever sales emails, right? There always needs to be that feeling of trust that what you're going to get it to do can be done safely. So yeah, kudos for sort of scratching that itch and sort of pushing it forward because yeah, it's an absolutely huge area for sure. Um, I was interested that you found sort of diversity of data sources matter enormously. Combining tools written by the I love kubectl person with the I love Java person give sort of far richer context. Um, what do you think that tells us about who should be contributing to the operational knowledge that gets built into these agents?
there's so much funny history around that one that I didn't put in the article because it's a bit personal. In the earliest days, we had these massive debates, like kind of ugly from like our very sort of DevOps SRE oriented crew who really thought that the priority for our library should really be all about kubectl, Cloud CLI command, etc. And then our developers were like, why would you ever bother using that when you could just look through logs? And really wanted to deepen the log analysis work and deepen the log analysis work. It was such a nasty, but we just wound up doing both, right? I mean, it was just easier. And the fascinating thing was that for every version of the library, where when we had kind of parallel tracks, for every version of the library that was only one track or only the other track, accuracy was pretty good. And for every version where we merged the two libraries, accuracy was excellent. And then when we started saying like, we started noticing this. And we're like, wow, that's kind of weird that like actually the truly different engineering background perspectives on how should I troubleshoot something. When we started adding like, hey, here's actually what a data expert thinks about, it was like, that's weird. Accuracy just went massively up again. It was just a hole in the original theme. And when we started adding those in, it was a wow. When we started saying like, hey, why don't we do a little bit of like almost like run style testing, which was just a hole in our original, nobody in our team had really done much of that before. We all kind of knew that it existed. But once we started adding that into the library, huge bump in accuracy again. So it's one of these, and like so provable in the data sets that we have, that actually diversity of engineering backgrounds all focused on troubleshooting the same problem is one of the greatest determinants for us
Mhm.
of accuracy.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. In the article, you draw a sharp line between getting to say 85% on alert triage, which you call, what was the term, well scoped but mostly useless, and 95% on like general Q&A, which is far harder but far more valuable. Why is that distinction, let's say, like the real measure of maturity?
We know we actually have, I really like actually, I mean, not to throw shade, but we had a tiny, tiny little competitor. We were talking to a tech lead who, before we'd spoken with him, had gone with our competitor and was kind of shutting that project down and moving our way. And he said, hey, awesome. We've now successfully turned like 20 incoming alerts to 40 incoming root cause hypotheses. This has added no value. This has just added 0, 0, 0 value. And I think that's right. I think the vendor thing is when you see that your system's only about 85% accurate in any given alert, then you say, hey, here are 3 hypotheses, and one of the 3 is definitely correct. And that's just like, it's useless. I mean, it's just totally, totally, totally useless. Uh, so we see a lot of like, I think on the vendor side, that's sort of going away. I mean, you see every once in a while, 1, 2 people at startups that think they've done something special there. On the DIY project, it's kind of what people get to on a laptop and they start to put it into any kind of material system. And they're like, wow, this actually takes more time than it saves. Yeah, so 85% accuracy, turning one alert into 3 root cause analysis, 3 root cause hypotheses, that's just useless.
Mhm.
Uh, it just takes so much. It's just a waste of tokens and a waste of human time and a waste of human and investor capital. And I can't say anything worse. But then I think there's this magic that happens when you start to get accuracy up, 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 and you really broaden the aperture, because I think alert triage is like, it's a real problem for some teams, but it's the really, really the bigger unlock that I think makes the people on those teams act in much, much, much more senior roles is the deep research. Ask a question and get a deeply researched and thoughtful answer, and that is like many orders of magnitude harder as a problem to solve.
Yeah.
And it's
Uh, So when it comes to sort of chasing that sort of added accuracy, I think you made the point that nobody notices a gap until they ask a question and get an "I don't know," right? And like we were talking about before, like the exhaust, right? Is learning from the output, learning from the gaps. How would you turn that moment into like a system getting better?
Mhm. So we used to do when I wrote that article, we actually did a kind of very, very fully human in the loop. Hey, I don't know. Would you be willing to work with me to write some automation so that the next time you ask this question, I know, or at least I can get further in my investigation? That was about as good as coding models could get in October, November of last year. I think that was underlying models, that was best practice around the harnesses, etc. I don't believe in like writing code and executing it on the fly. I think that to me feels that's way deep in the dangerous bucket. But we're increasingly working on system coming back saying, I don't know. Do you want to write some code around this right now? And even being able to like predict a little bit, like, hey, I think I'm not going to get the answer to this. Let's start asking somebody to say, hey, I have 5 ideas, 5 specs that I can turn into code very, 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 very quickly. Not to say choose one. It's like, I think I should just do all of them right now. Yes. Okay, great. Turn those on my phone. All of that is going to now be run very, very often in the background. And all of that is going to get used to answer this question that's going right now. So I'm very excited about that area. And we're doing a lot of playing with like separating out code paths that are going to reach out to external systems, those that take much, much more review, from dynamic code that says, hey, I fetched a whole bunch of data into the context from external systems. And now I'm just writing code in a sandbox that's just doing data analysis on data that I've fetched. I'm kind of, I mean, maybe I'm just getting too into the weeds here, but everything touching an external system, I think will stay human in the loop for a while, because you can really screw that up royally. Even if the code is correct, hey, that's a particularly fragile system. Hey, it's under duress. Like, hey, do you really want to hit the API server 5 times? There's just a lot of tribal knowledge there. But I think just flashing code that's only operating with the data that you've collected from external systems into a little sandbox, that models are good enough. I think we're going to wind up actually running a lot of that code on the fly, if you ask me. But we'll see. We'll see.
Mhm. You compare where SRE is heading towards. It's heading to like flying a fighter jet, right? There's an enormous amount happening at your fingertips, very fast, all the time. What do you think the SRE role really looks like in, say, 5 years, if you're right? I mean, assuming humanity hasn't been wiped out by the robots, the 50-50 on that one. What does SRE look like in 5 years, do you think?
I do think that it is a fighter pilot role. I still think that analogy holds the exact same way that our top developers, like a 5 or 6 hour day is now exhausting, like wipes out some of our top developers. But in 5 or 6 hours, it's very consistent that they will do more than we used to do in 2 or 3 months. So getting to rest, getting to recharge, and just getting diversity over the course of the day, I think is really, 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 really important. And I can absolutely see, like, we do our own on-call rotations. Um, and increasingly, we're less focused in on-call of like fixing incidents or looking out for instance the problems. Our goal of every on-call session is, did you improve the system? Is there more automation, more automated diagnostics there that we can run more efficiently to catch the existence of things and to rule out the existence of things? Like, are you making judgment calls about, hey, how do we add more and more and more of these to rule out different cases so that different people on different teams are not needed? The idea that like a 5 or a 10, or you've got like a 20-person war room call, like, let's get rid of all of that by just coating the world with better and better diagnostics. Um, the on-call rotation for us is, it is absolutely expected that you leave the rotation with the system more automated than it was when you started. And it's an exhausting and ultra high paid role. Like, it is so, you can just tell every day that somebody is on call, they created value. There's no doubt about it.
Nice. Well, yeah, I think that's pretty positive. If people want to know more, if they want to learn more about RunWhen or read anything else that you've written, where's the best place to go? Runwen.com.
No, I mean, certainly, ask Claude.
Sure.
I'd say runrun.com. Our registry of skills is the easiest way for me to describe what it is that we do. All these agent skills templates that we spent years and years and years building. I'm incredibly proud of the work that the team did there. I take zero credit for it because none of that was my hands. That was our team. So I think our website, the registry of skills, is the really, really important part. And also, we're lucky. We're still small enough. Like, I still have like my calendar link on LinkedIn, and I'm amazed how few people take me up on it. But if I can be helpful at all, just hit me up on LinkedIn.
Nice. Yeah, great. Well, we're at time. So thanks for the conversation. It's been interesting and certainly illuminating. So yeah, keep writing, and I think the next time AI completely revolutionizes something, we'll get back in touch.
Curious, actually, just as a point of feedback, what resonated with you most?
I've seen so much myself that data can be a problem for AI unless it's extremely well curated. Like that's the biggest challenge I always find when trying to get AI to, I'm not an SRE, right? When trying to get it to debug something or debug a problem, it is all that extra context, the stuff in my head, the stuff in some markdown file, checking something in Confluence. It's like the memories that get stored, but the actual data, I think having quick access to a huge number of data sets is valuable as long as it knows how to orchestrate all of that. So yeah, I mean, you would think that, AI's skill is in like processing huge volumes of data, but AI's real skill is in planning actions based on data, and getting clear signal is so difficult in most big code bases or complex systems.
Fascinating.
Yeah, I like the term exhaust though. That's going to be my fourth pillar at least. I'll have to figure out where to put the E in. Well, there are I guess like I think we'll end up at like melted or something. That'll be the six pillars. Melted.
Melty.
Yeah. Well, melty for now, but yeah, we'll get to melted, I'm sure. But yeah. Yeah. Thanks again, Kyle. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.